We are Cactus Wrestling. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos.
Welcome back to Cactus Wrestling.
Welcome
Well,
back.
welcome back. The Pac-12 is
Smaller.
smaller. That's a good
Barely
way
the
to put it.
Pac-12 to start.
So, as many people have heard, in many sports, a lot of schools are leaving the Pac-12. What does this mean for wrestling, though? Well, actually, not that much. Arizona State is the biggest school that is leaving the Pac-12. That is a big deal,
Yeah.
but it's a small conference to begin with. There's only 6 schools. There's going to be 5 next year, unless they add one of the newer schools, maybe like a Lindenwood or like Little Rock is in the Pac-12. Why? I don't know, but they're in the Pac-12. Arizona State had 5 NCAA qualifiers last year. They've been historically a strong program. They're on a bit of a decline recently. I pulled up the allocations from last year's NCAA tournament, and it's not like the Pac-12 was really notoriously known for wrestling. They actually had the second lowest amount of allocations, only
Surprise me though.
above SoCon. So they only had 19 allocations last season. That's
And
pretty
a
much
conference champ is a guaranteed slot, so that means they only got 9 additional allocations, which is nothing.
yeah. And if you take Arizona State out, who had 5 qualifiers last year, you're looking at about 14, maybe fewer.
Yeah.
Obviously, the fewest that they could have is 10, but 14. I mean, that's pretty low. That's right on par with SoCon, who only had 12.
And they're down to how many teams now?
So they're going to have 5 teams. So that Stanford and Oregon State, those are the 2 that are pretty much going to be vying for a team title. Yeah. Then you have Cal Poly, CSU Bakersfield, and Little Rock.
I really feel like they need to combine with another conference. Like what, 5 teams? Like, I mean, I granted the ACC has what, 6 teams. I mean, I think the ACC should probably combine with the SoCon and just be the ACC SoCon or something. But like, it doesn't make sense to allocate just like one per. I don't know.
It's actually kind of funny you mentioned the ACCs. So I was listening to a Rob Cole interview the other day, and he made some remark, and I was working, so I wasn't paying too much attention to it, just more background noise. But he made a remark about Stanford to the ACCs. And he was like, yeah, he's like, we're already traveling. He goes, what's, going to Virginia Tech and NC State, who cares? So if Stanford
that would
leaves,
be that'd be epic to add Stanford to ACC.
and that would be, just another team lost for the Pac-12, where he's like, yeah, he goes, I'm really not that.
Pac-12
Like,
loses another.
I mean, the gist of what I heard from their interview, and again, I wasn't listening to it that in depth, and I'm sure people might have heard the same interview that I heard. So that if you, maybe paid attention to it more than I did, can fact check it. But it made it, the piece that I listened to made it sound like he was like, oh, like we're possibly leaving the Pac-12 in a few years ourselves, and we're going to look to pursue joining the ACCs.
I mean, I'd love to see more teams in the ACC. It seems like
Yeah.
Pac-12 is just a whirling drain, circling the drain here, and it's going to cease to exist in no time. I mean, Pac-12, you think there's going to be 12 teams, and there's 5 for wrestling, so it's not exactly a great sign. And the better teams are leaving for better competition, so I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon State followed suit, if especially if Stanford leaves. I mean, maybe they'll be like, now we can dominate. We're the best of these 4 teams. Yes.
So I have it up now. There was 4 schools that didn't want Cal and Stanford in the ACCs. And one of them is North Carolina State.
Yeah, Pat Pop doesn't want.
Well, I think it's more from a football perspective. I mean, honestly, like anyone that's watching this knows that like football kind of drives these conferences because it's such a large sport and
right.
a lot of money in football, so it makes sense that it would drive a lot of these conference decisions. I'm sure Pat Pop is not like rubbing his hands together, like,
No
yes, keep
Arizona
out
State.
Rob,
Zeke, you stay away.
keep out Rob Cole. But it would be pretty cool to see, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Stanford in a pretty cool race. Plus, there's some other great ACC schools already. But it would just be awesome to see that conference grow, and maybe the Pac-12 kind of.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you see ACC brackets, it's only 6 schools. You're just kind of I mean, granted, these are some of the best, like they're good schools, but it's like still. And then, but the Pac-12, back to the Pac-12, these are going to be smaller brackets. They're going to be 5-man brackets. One guy gets guaranteed to go to NCAAs. Like, that's pretty
Double
good
elimination.
odds. You go to Big Ten. There's now like how many schools in the Big Ten?
14, I think.
Big Ten is deep.
14, but I mean, then again, they also have like 9 go. So,
So the remaining schools for the Pac-12, if we didn't say it already, Stanford and Oregon State are the 2 full-time, and the 3 associate members are Cal Poly, CSU Bakersfield, and Little Rock. And frankly, it's just going to come down to Oregon State versus Stanford. And that's not a diss at the smaller schools. It's how it is right now.
yeah.
And if Stanford leaves, it's going to be Oregon State really just running the table.
Well, I mean, it's hardly a conference of 4 teams. Like, really feel like they need to disband and just
have a quad.
join others or form a new or something.
Well, that's interesting because the Southern Conference, I feel like it's been Appalachian State and Campbell have been like the 2-headed horse for that conference. And they only get pretty much 1 or 2 allocations per weight class in the Southern Conference.
I'd like to see that conference join the ACC. Like, it just merge into one. That's just me, though.
Yeah, I don't know how some of these conference talks, like Mike said, it's probably football driven because that's where they make all the money. It's kind of funny.
Not every school has a football team.
That's true.
No.
Binghamton does not have a football team, but
it's kind of making these decisions.
It's kind of funny to think that Stanford, which is on the West Coast, could be a part of the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah, the Atlantic Coast Conference adds some California teams.
That's how they get you.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the Big Ten. I mean, there's going to be like 20 schools in the Big Ten, and the Big 12. I mean, those numbers.
Big 12 is going to be really interesting with Arizona State adding to the mix because then you already got Oklahoma State, you got Missouri, you got Iowa State. Like, it makes a pretty interesting team tournament. Like, getting a lot more competitive in the Big 12. Like, which I love to see.
That is true. And the Big 12 had on average about 6 allocations per weight class last year. They had 65 total for 2023.
So maybe it's going to be bumped up to 70.
Yeah, maybe they'll probably get up to 70. So it will be interesting. I think Pac-12 is definitely on the down, but Big 12 has been on the rise of late with some of the schools upping up their programs in the past few years. But as it currently stands, there are 7 wrestling conferences. Maybe we see Pac-12 just disband altogether and then have to find a new one. I mean, we saw that Missouri was part of the MAC for many years, and then they joined the Big 12. We've seen that happen with the what was it, Mike? Binghamton was part of?
They were part of the CAA, and now they're in the EIWA. Yeah,
the CAA. That was, I think it was George
7
Mason,
schools.
Boston University, Hofstra, Binghamton,
Drexel.
So that was a smaller conference that disbanded, and they're part of the EIWA now, which is that's just a wrestling. It's a wrestling only conference.
Yeah, the EIWA has a lot of teams in it too.
Yeah, and there's like 17. Yeah, 17.
Did you say there's only 7 different conferences?
7 different conferences. Yeah.
Wow, I don't know why.
So you have the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, the EIWA, the MAC, Pac-12, and the Southern Conference.
No, maybe more schools just need to add wrestling so that way these conferences could get bigger.
Well, and that's, I mean, we're starting to see like Lindenwood and Queens and Presbyterian. I mean, obviously they're going to have to join conferences. We saw LIU join EIWA a few years ago. So maybe these schools they get added to the Pac-12 or maybe the Southern Conference.
Right. Or
I
the
don't know.
ACC.
Or the ACC.
Big Ten. Put them in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But here's
all in the Big Ten.
Here's what I want to leave us with. How crazy would it be to see SEC wrestling?
It's got to happen. It has to happen.
I mean, you're talking Georgia, Alabama,
Clemson.
Ole Miss, Clemson. Like these are big time schools that don't have Division I NCAA.
Yeah, who's
wrestling
going to be the
program.
first team of those schools to add a wrestling program?
Well, didn't Clemson used to have wrestling? I feel like I vaguely remember this. Years ago.
Yeah, I feel like they might have. Yeah.
Like, let's see. I mean, because I know everyone talks about like, oh, football is so big in that conference that they'll never allow another sport really to kind of come in and take their territory.
I hardly see it as taking their territory. I think the guys that are going to wrestle are not choosing between football and wrestling.
And they're different. They're different
Seasons.
times of the year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Clemson dropped wrestling in '95.
Yep.
Well, Syracuse used to have wrestling too.
Yeah. Who
Gene Mills was the coach.
Well, who also wrestled there was Tom Ryan wrestled there.
Oh, before he transferred to Iowa?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
So honestly, some historical figures through that program.
So what do you guys think of Pac-12 altogether? The misarranging of conferences for wrestling. What's the impact going to look like for this upcoming season? Drop it down in the comments down below. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and tell your friends, family about Cactus Wrestling.
Yeah, it's kind of like Dave Petrini wrestling for Newtown. Iconic.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for watching. We are Cactus Wrestling, and we'll see you next time on our next video.